Good morning, everybody, and thanks for being here. You are very brave people. Yesterday I learned two things. If you drink beer, you have to eat as well. And if you present at 9 a.m., you have to bring your laptop back to the hotel room. So, fortunately, Belgian people here can be trusted, so my laptop was still here when I arrived here this morning. So we are going to talk about...
Did you actually learn something? Forgot to tell. He never learns.
So we are going to talk about PowerApps, Common Data Model, and Common Data Services, but most of all today we're going to talk about connectivity, because we live in a world which is constantly changing, and everything that has a power plug also gets an internet connection. And in order to handle all that connectivity, I think we have to change our mindset. So today we'll talk about how PowerApps, Common Data Service, and Common Data Model fit into that model, and also where NAV fits into that. So Michael, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm back on stage. I used to do the keynotes all the time, together with Luke in the old days, my previous job with Microsoft, but since 2 years ago, I started for NAV, and I'm back to coding again. So you actually see me code on stage, so you can be the judge if this is successful or not, but at least I'm back to my roots, back with you here in the crowd, so.
Yeah. And Microsoft also invented CEL long time ago, right?
No, I did. Sorry about that, Mark.
So I'm Mark, and I've been doing NAV since it was still called Navision. Started in 1997, and I'm actually going to use the version that I've been implementing or buying back then for the presentation today. So if we look at the agenda, we're going to start with a quick introduction about the building blocks and the concepts. Then I'm going to do a PowerApps demo. Then Michael is going to show Common Data Model and Common Data Services. And then we'll have some examples of how to use OData4 in combination with C# and AL. And then we have Q&A. The idea is to spend 15 minutes on one, 15 on two, and 30 minutes on three, and then something like that. So we actually have some time left for Q&A. We have the t-shirts to give away, the Antwerp t-shirts, but I also have a whole bunch of NAV skills t-shirts that if you come here back down on the stage after the session, you can actually grab your NAV skills t-shirt out of the box if you want. I'm not going to bring them back home. So today, no marketing demos, no licensing. We actually don't know anything about licensing, so please don't ask us what all of this stuff costs. We're just going to try to focus on technology and try to make you understand how all of this works. So most of us have been with NAV for a long time, and we all think that in the center of the world we have Seaside. We are all experts in Seaside, and we've been using it for a long time. When we have to solve something, we solve it in Seaside with CEL. And most of us think that Seaside is this like big hammer that can solve everything. Some of us even think of Seaside like this, right? It's a really powerful, super mega tool. But in fact, if you really look at Seaside, it's basically like a rubber hammer. Microsoft is restricting us from making a lot of mistakes, and it's really trying to guide us from preventing making mistakes, right? So we have to start expanding our horizon in this changing world. We have to get out of our comfort zone. Our comfort zone would be typically that we have Seaside in the middle of our comfort zone. This is what we have been using for a long time. And we have to start learning. We have a lot of things that we need to learn. One of them, of course, is Visual Studio Code. But we also have to learn PowerApps, and we have to learn how Microsoft Flow works, right? For example, right now, if we send an email with NAV, we all use code unit 397. But if you use PowerApps and Flow, that code unit can actually be discontinued. You can actually send the email using Flow, right? The same goes with EDI. We all have tools that download stuff from FTP and SFTP, and we do that with .NET Interop in C-side, but you can actually do the same with Flow, right? So all these objects can actually be replaced by other technology that you don't have to maintain. Then we have the danger zone. This is where Michael gets in. This is where ASP.NET Core is. This is where Angular is. This is where all the frameworks are that young people are using, right? And this is where all of this technology gets together. And you can actually leverage CDS and CDM in order to get this connectivity to work. So life begins at the end of your comfort zone. For me, it was a very steep learning curve. Michael said, oh, let's do a session about CDS. Yeah, okay, let's do that. So I actually had to learn all of this stuff from scratch during the last couple of weeks. And I'm just going to explain to you guys what I learned from all of this. So we all put NAV in the middle. Let's actually replace it with something more modern. So we put NAV in the middle, and then we start connecting NAV to all kinds of devices, but we always use NAV as the central point of everything, and then we start connecting, and everything ends up in the NAV SQL database using web services, and everything is connected. But I think we should change this idea. I think we should move NAV to be just one of the other apps. And I think if you really want to connect everything, all these devices will start talking to each other. All these devices will have web services. And instead of having NAV in the middle, we should start thinking or considering to have CDS and PowerApps and Flow in the middle of all of this. So the way Microsoft explains this platform, it's a business application platform, and it consists of 3 pillars and a couple of different levels. We have power users, and power users are what we in the Navision world would typically consider consultants who know how to do a little bit of programming, people who know how to make changes to the UI, or maybe even a consultant that can actually connect 2 code units together and remove the confirmation dialog in between. And then you have the pro developers, and those are the architects. Those are the people who actually make posting routines and fit everything together so it actually becomes a workable application. On the bottom of that, you have a common data service and connectors and gateways. And for the power users, we have Power BI, Power Apps, and Microsoft Flow. Actually, I think I heard somebody actually yesterday say Power Flow. That would actually make it right. So Power BI, Power Apps, Power Flow. And for the IT pros, we have Pro BI, Pro Dev with Visual Studio, and Pro Integration with Logic Apps, right? So today we're not going to cover Power BI. Steven covered that last year. If I remember correctly, we are going to talk about PowerApps. I'm going to show you a little bit of that. So PowerApps can be considered like the pages that we have right now. It's the new UI that's built on top of all of this connectivity. Microsoft Flow is like workflow. It's allowing you to connect stuff together. So if something happens, then something else should happen. And all of these applications that use Flow have the same type of connectors, so everything understands each other. And then you have the Pro Dev, which can be considered like, okay, that's what we call code units. I had a hard time mapping Logic Apps to something, so I said, well, maybe that's processing reports, but it's also where you do coding. And then a common data service is where your data is, right? This is where you would compare it to tables. And then a common data gateway is web services. So everything starts with OData. If your application understands OData, then you can connect it to all of this good stuff. Then we have Visual Studio Code that you can use to create your business logic, or you can use the full Visual Studio if you want to, if you prefer to use that. And then you add HTML5 to the front end. All business applications these days have HTML5 user interfaces, and that should make everybody happy. You can code in any programming language that you like. You can code in C# or TypeScript or in AL. But basically, the programming language is not important anymore, and you can connect different applications with different programming languages, and you can just use whatever you want to use. And then you have OAuth 2, and that's basically the security glue that fits everything together. So let me start with a demo. How do you demo something like this, right? I watched a lot of YouTube videos on PowerApps and Flow, and there are a lot of demos that you can find on how to connect things together, on how to connect Dynamics 365 to PowerApps. But I figured, well, all of you guys can actually look that up on YouTube yourself, and you can actually do that, and I think it's my job to motivate you guys to actually start doing that. So I say, okay, what can I actually show these guys that they will probably not find on YouTube, right? So I decided to connect Navision Financials version 2, the version of Navision that I bought in 1997, and see if we can actually connect that to PowerApps and how that would work, right? So this is Navision Financials. Who has worked with this version? Oh, a lot of hands. We love it, right? So actually the benefit of Navision Financials version 2 is that it actually runs on Windows 10. You don't have to do a technical upgrade to a new platform in order to actually make it run. But for this demo, what I actually did is I took a native backup from my database and actually restored it in NAV 2009 R2 on SQL Server. And the reason for that is that I had to somehow expose an OData web service from this, right? PowerApps and Flow expect an OData connection. So I'm going to show you how I actually did that. And there's several options. I just picked an option that I could get to work. So the thing that I actually decided to do is in SQL Server, I have created a view on a table. I have created a new table, NAV TechDays attendees, and I expose the data from this table as a view. The reason I've created a view is that I have to remove the timestamp field, which NAV automatically adds. The timestamp field, at least from what I experimented with, if I try to wrap that in an OData web service, it doesn't really like it. So actually, the data is showing without the timestamp field. And the next thing that I do is I go into Visual Studio. Ooh, this is the danger zone, right? So in Visual Studio, I actually create a new project. And as a project type, I am choosing Visual C# Web, and I'm going to pick ASP.NET Web Application. Let's call it NAV TechDays. Real, so this is for real. Mm-hmm. And now it asks me what kind of app do I want, and I pick the Azure Web API, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Azure, and Azure is going to create an API for me that I can call from any device anywhere, right? So now it's going to create all of the plumbing for me. And the next thing I do is I have to add a model. Going to create a new item. And now I'm actually going to connect to my SQL Server database using an ADO.NET connection. Call it NAV TechDays DB. Add. And I'm going to generate the code automatically from the database. So I'm going to tell which database I'm going to use. And this is where you have to tell Azure which machine you're going to look at. This is where, in my first attempt, I put in localhost. But then if you publish it to Azure, Azure cannot find it, right? So you have to actually connect it to your Azure machine. So in this case, I'm going to use the IP address of the Azure machine. I'm using SQL Server authentication. Test connection successful, right? So it's going to use this connection from Azure into my database. I also had to open port number 1433 in Azure so that Azure can actually connect to SQL Server. It doesn't have to be 1433, you can actually use another port as well if you prefer. And now I can select my NAV TechDays database. This is just a demo, so security is not something that we're going to worry about today. Maybe this is not smart to do this for your real customer, but in this case, we're just going to do that. And now I'm going to pick the NAV TechDays PowerApps database, and it's going to generate some C# code. This is way outside of my comfort zone, but I'm going to show you what it actually did. You can see here in the error message, in the warnings, that it said I'm using a SQL Server view, and I can read from a SQL Server view, so I actually can get data. But with a SQL Server view, I cannot actually put and post and patch data, right? I could make that work, but that's not for the scope of today's demo. And it automatically creates a class based on my view, and it's going to use that class to expose the data. So the next step is I have to add a controller, and we're going to do that with a scaffolded item. No idea what the difference is. Do you know the difference between an item and a scaffolded item?
No idea.
So we're going to use that. We're going to use a Web API 2 controller. And now I made a mistake because I actually have to build my solution first. Building the solution will actually build some metadata that actually this guy depends on. So the build has succeeded. And now I can actually add scaffolded item, Web API 2 controller. Going to use this one and this one. Just call it NAV TechDays controller. Use async. So now it's going to build more code for me. Until now, I have not actually written any code myself. The only thing I have to do now is I'll actually have to search in my code for something called Swagger. We're going to create a Swagger API, and Swagger is a language definition for building OData APIs. Going to search for that, and what I can do here is can actually enable the Swagger UI. And now if I do that, and I actually test my solution, and the demo gods are nice to me today, I hope they are. So now I have to add the Swagger endpoint. And what I have now is an OData endpoint to my SQL Server view. I can actually click on my NAV TechDays, and now I can actually use the get statement, try it out, and now I actually get the results from my Navision Financials database in my API. So now the next step would be to make this public, right? Now it only works on my machine. Now I actually have to connect it to Azure. And Azure is going to make sure that from anywhere in the world it can connect to this API. And then Azure is going to go to my SQL Server machine. In order to do that, I have to build it and publish it. So I can actually publish this, and I can actually connect it to my Microsoft Azure App Service. I'm not going to do it right now because we're actually trying to be efficient on time. So I actually prepared this already. So here we have my my Azure account, and in my Azure account I have published my API, and you can see here I have my Navision Financials Web, and this is actually the endpoint that Azure has published for me and that I can now start querying from every machine anywhere, right? So let me go from my Azure virtual machine to my local machine. I actually wanted to start this presentation with the Fellowship of the Ring, but Michael didn't think it was a good idea.
I hate it.
It's like, it's in the Shire and everything is green and everyone is nice and we have seaside and blah, 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 and then the ring gets out, right? One ring to rule them all, and then everything just turns upside down. That's what this guy is doing to us as well. So here we have Navision Financials Web.Azure Websites.net and then Swagger UI, and here we have the same Swagger, but now it's not going into my local machine, but now it's going through Azure to the Azure VM, and now I actually have the same data in on my local machine, right? So now the next step is to see if we can actually use this in Power BI. So let's see if we can do that. So let's go to PowerApps. And I'm first going to show you the result, and then I'm going to explain how I got there. So we have the NAV TechDays PowerApp, and I'm not using any of the fancy UI that you can do with PowerApps. I really hope that when you get back home that you actually go and watch these cool YouTube videos, that all of the cool stuff that you can do with PowerApps. But if you have been with Navision for a long time and you still feel that with the role-theta client you're limited because Microsoft only gives you 5 colors and you're not in control of where you can put your data, right? PowerApps is solving that. With PowerApps you can put data everywhere, you have all the colors, and it's really, it feels like you are back in the Navision client. So here we have the PowerApp, and we actually have the data from Navision Financials. So let's actually add another attendee. We'll go to Navision, and we'll just add someone else. I know that my brother is in the room here, so I'll add him, and he works for Van Dijk from Holland. Now let's refresh the PowerApps and cross the fingers. Everyone, please cross the fingers. And he's in PowerApps, right? Cool. So let's close the app. And actually what I did is I had to create a custom connector. The custom connector allows you to import the definition from your Swagger API. If I go to my Swagger UI, I have a special URL, which is called swagger/docs/v1. This is a JSON file. You can copy this JSON file to Notepad and then import that into PowerApps, and that gives PowerApps the definition. Officially, you have to clean it up because this Swagger UI also contains put, patch, and delete, and the SQL view doesn't support that. So you have to clean it up a little bit before you actually do that. And then after you have done that, so here I can actually edit the connection and test the connection, test operation, and now we get status 200 and we get the same data. And let's look at the app. Yes, that's okay. Home, NAV TechDays, edit. This is where I should sing and dance or tell a joke.
Please, Mark, do.
Here we have the table, which is my control. And you can see that this table is connected to Navision Financials Web, which is my custom API. And it actually is using the get statement on the Swagger API. So I hope that you agreed with me that this is a cool demo, right? Connecting something from 1997 to technology that nobody could ever dream of back then. Don't try this at home. I forgot one very important thing, which is security. And the main reason for that is my Azure account is connected to my Outlook.com account, which doesn't have Azure Active Directory. And my PowerApps is connected to my NAV Skills account, which doesn't have an Azure subscription, right? So I actually forgot that. So every one of you can actually query that endpoint right now and get these 6 attendees back from the web service, right? So let's wrap up, and then we'll give the stage to Michael, and he'll show CDM and CDS. Microsoft Flow and PowerApps, it's a new suite of development tools. It's designed in the cloud, it's born in the cloud solution, and you can actually start connecting all of these Internet of Things devices. As long as they use OData, everything can be connected. It's workflow and event driven, based on OData and OAuth. Using the common data model and services, like Michael will show you in a minute. You can code using Azure functions, but you can actually code using anything as long as it goes into a connection using OData. So I made a very quick comparison between PowerApps and the NAV Web Client. When should you use the web client or the phone client, and when should you use PowerApps? PowerApps has a way more flexible controls. The web client and the rotated client still try to force us into like this structure that Microsoft thinks works for everybody. So you really have a WYSIWYG design. Native modern data items, it has way more controls than NAV is doing. You can connect it to an endless amount of apps. It's designed to be connected. It has offline capabilities, but I have been told that is still in the like playing around stage. But there's a hyperlink on the slide. If you can click on it, you actually go to a website that explains it. And the community, I mean, I love you guys and the Navision community, and we are great together. But the community for C# and PowerApps and Azure is even just way, way bigger than the NAV community. With the web client, you have the UI, which is bound to the database. The advantage is that you have native Office integration, right? Navision just natively connects to Excel and Word. It's only online, but it has transaction integrity. Transaction integrity is hard with web services. And the web client of NAV is accessible outside of your Active Directory. With PowerApps, as far as I know, the information I have, you still need to be part of the Active Directory, right? So you cannot use it for people who don't work for your company unless you want everybody to be in your AD. Key takeaways, it's easy to get up and start it. It's connected to Flow. It's definitely not a replacement for ERP. It's something new for solving new challenges. I think it's something that every NAV developer should know and should be aware of. And it's not limited to NAV 2018 customers, right? With Azure and C# and Swagger, you can create an endpoint. I used a view on my SQL Server database, but you can also use a CSV file or an Excel file, or you can convert a SOAP web service to an OData web service. Anything as long as you convert it, right? So timing is perfect.
Fantastic, yeah.
Yeah.
So what you just saw was not just a bunch of technologies, but you also saw a guy, Mark, who lived his whole life in seaside, actually now within a couple of days, long days, actually pulled it off and created all this new technology. So I think Mark is one of the smarter NAV developers, or maybe the smartest, but it also shows that everybody can take this journey into the new world. So should we give Mark an applause before we move on? So let's look at the common data model and also the this common data services platform. That's sort of the thing around it. As always, Microsoft is fantastic at doing these marketing slides. And when I first saw it, I asked my friends at Microsoft, "Oh, this is Project Green," and say, got this angry look. No, it's not. And those of you who remember back was that Project Green was about creating this common data model and creating a framework on top of it. And I was part of that, and we spent a lot of money, and it burned down. It was closed. But this is something different and new. So I hope it's successful this time. But it's if people remember back, it's sort of the same thing. Sorry for saying that. So also with something like this, it's not funny at all. So cost $2 billion. The promise here, and promise always hard to keep. So let's dig into a couple of these to see how this actually works. But at least something that works is that it's extremely easy to provision. So if you try to sign up on PowerApps, it takes you maybe 20 seconds to get in and get a database. You can even put a database on your OneDrive. So, and if you ever try to put up a full NAV solution on-prem with SQL Server or anything, and put that on the cloud afterwards, it will take you a day or more. But also, even though this is fantastic, I also saw that if some of you have probably looked at the expense app that NAV has done for Office, and that's actually faster. So you can deploy a Azure NAV solution now in seconds. So actually, NAV is speeding this promise up. Then the other promise is a common data model. I'll look into that, and also there's a data access layer that's access to the SDK, and I'm going to also give you a glimpse of how that works and how to work with it. So let's look at the common data model, and looking at these models always sort of archaeologically, because the people who create these models always come from somewhere in the world. And if you look at these entities, you can see, this is from CRM and this is from AX. And basically there's some foundation classes, which is great because I always wish there was these kind of classes in Seaside where you have an address object and a country and these kind of things, but it doesn't exist and it's still not there. But those kind of things exist in AX from the day one and also in CRM. Things like customer service, of course, come from CRM. And then some years back, the X team did a sort of an org structure push where they created an org structure for sort of embracing companies with hundreds of thousands of employees. And that ended up in CDM as well. So that's basically you get the full meal for that. And then there's the sales and marketing things that come from CRM as well. That's rather lightweight, but still really powerful to do this kind of thing. So you see the heritage of this if you look into them, and you feel right at home. The problem here is, however, if you come from NAV, there's nothing. The NAV guy was not in the room, so they left you out, Mark. Sorry. But of course, like any other framework, you need to have custom fields and custom tables, and you can add this in using PowerApps, and it's really dirt simple to do this. As Mark said, there's tons of YouTube videos on it. It's really powerful to do this, so it's a really great experience in PowerApps to set this in. But let's, I promise you to look at some code, so please switch, Mark. Yeah, I'm on the right one. So actually what always beats MSDN is to open Visual Studio and actually look at what's in there, because that's the perfect truth, and MSDN is sort of the last year's truth. So, but let's take a look at this, and this is the whole sales order entity in there. It's really simple, so it's back to where NAV was many years ago in terms of complexity. So they left tons of stuff out that we have in NAV today, but that's good because that's not the purpose of this. You have to have something that's simple that also can be used across other applications. And you have Nice things like addresses in here. I can click into this. So my mouse left the building. And I have a nice address in here. I also have things like coins in here. Again, something that I would love to have seen in NAV many years ago, where you have the amount and the currency code in here. And this can never be blank. That's my hate thing in NAV today. That's why on earth did we construct the currency code to be blank 25 years ago? But that's what people have to live with today. But that's not the case in here. So these things are pretty good. But that said, actually, other systems like Salesforce, they're using the NAV model where you don't have objects, because having objects in REST-based web services gives a lot of hassles, because you don't want to have these classes in there. You want to have a flat structure. So if you look at the Financial Force API, they have exactly the same as NAV. So everything is completely flat. So they're also going back to basic. Another reason could be that Dan Brown is now with that team. So seems like he learned something from being on the team. So, but also these models have issues. We have talked to the CRM team, but they have not listened that greatly so far. And actually, we tried to create an invoice report on top of this, but the problem is that you cannot sell to somebody and ship it to somebody else, because there's only one name down here. So it has to be sort of the same company, different addresses, but you cannot do the thing you usually do today, where you actually ship thing to somebody and send the bill to somebody else. That cannot be done. Also, if we do down into payment terms, so in a NAV, of course, everybody knows that payment terms is determined by a address expression, and then you get sort of a date out of it. So, but what you have in here is sort of, I think this must come from CM, that you basically are stuck with these options in here. So, and this sort of gives it you will have a pretty hard time of mapping your beautiful NAV expression into this. There's no way around this. So I hope this will be changed in a future model. So. But otherwise, this is an entity, so you also have the lines down here, which is also pretty good, and you can work with this and get sort of a full entity. But this is again NAV caught up on this. So if you saw the OData 4.0 or the API session yesterday with Anders Larsen and other people, NAV is just in par with this already, and you can do beautiful things with this. So let's move on to back to the slide market. Wait a second. So, sorry about that. So, just wanted to show you what I meant with the organization. So just put this in to get a hook into this, so I can go to the definition. And basically, the org structure in here is something that's taken out of AX. So you have parent organization and you have social networks where you can select between Twitter. You have the stock ticker and all sorts of things. So this can do anything. So compared to the sales order, which is really simple, this can sort of do any corporations in the full world, and that's what it was created for. So, but I'll come back to what the issue is here. So, yeah, thank you. So even though there's a lot of good things, there's some issues that I hope will be fixed in the future. So there's this abstraction level difficulties between the org structure and other entities. So the entities come from CRM are pretty simple and easy to understand, whereas something like the org structure is sort of out of the league in this world. So. And also the enum thing, you saw the payment terms, but this is actually for a lot of things, also freight and other enum in there. Enum is just not cutting it to do dates, so that's another thing that's broken. Then there's the thing I mentioned about the missing names that's for the addresses, which is also something. Of course, you can do a custom field in there, and I'll show you how to do this, but sort of it's not part of the model. And then of course, there's the whole idea that just like CRM integration, that you want to sync your data in this model with NAV. But those of you who ever work with synchronization, you know that first of all, it's a bad career move to work in these kind of things because no matter what you do, you will fail. I promise you that. So that's an advice. But having dual masters and two-way synchronization is asking for trouble. It will never ever work, no matter how many books you read. And I think we tried that with NAV over the years. So again, it's a bad fit for the NAV data model because things are just not fitting together very nicely. And then also there's a nice security model in NAV where you prevent people from reading things and doing a lot of things that's perfect over many years. When you're into CDM, it has its own security model, and whatever you synchronize over there, you have to set up security over again, and it's not doing the same as NAV is doing. So, okay, but it's very easy to download the CDM data model. It's also MSDN if you don't want to go into Visual Studio. So I encourage you to go and look at it because even though it's not done, it's going to be the future. But let's go in to look at the Common Data SDK and see how that looks. So can we switch back, Mark? Thank you. So actually, before digging in, I'm going to sort of show you initially how easy it is to create an OData hook into NAV, just to compare the two worlds. So in this case, I'm going to start with Visual Studio 2015, because unfortunately this requires a bit more plumbing in 2017, and we don't have the time for that. But it's so easy in 2015 that anybody can do this. So I create a new project in here. It's a console application. I don't care what it's called this time. So fantastic. Activity log. So I think I'm alive. So good. Then what I need is that I need to go into NAV, which I got there, and just get the OData URL for anything in here to get hold of my web service. Then I go into the references and add a service reference in here. I take the URL I just got in here, and then I need to get rid of everything back to the OData thing. I press go. Now it basically goes to NAV and gets the schema definition for everything. I'm going to call this demo. Press OK. And now behind the scenes, Visual Studio is creating .NET classes for all these NAV things inside, and now it's done. So if I go into the program CS, I can hopefully start coding. This was not supposed to happen, so.
Restart.
Yeah. Mark says restart. That always works. Also with NAV. So sorry about this. So. Damn it.
The demo gods.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
There we go.
So I now have my demo NAV, and then I'm going to do the new URI. New URI. And I'm going to need my URL again, including the company name. I think I need a parenthesis. So, is it happy? No. Now it's You, of course. Then I need to set the credentials. OData dot credentials equals system dot net dot credential cache dot default credentials. So now I'm ready to rock and roll. So now I can do basically OData dot sales order. Dot first. Console dot read. Okay. So at least I'm ready to go in here. What to set the breakpoint, so. Of course, OData 2 you cannot do write back into this, so it has some limitations, but at least this is a very, very easy way to get your entities. And of course, if you want to get more, the only thing you need to do is say var e.odata data.sales order.where and even though this can look weird from at the beginning, it's actually pretty easy to work with. .get enumerator. So this basically calls the OData and gets a number of records back. And then the only thing you need to do is while e.current e-data move next. So this is basically iterating over everything. So while row equals e.current. So current holds it. So basically, this basically iterates over the rows that you fetch. So you can create filters and you can access any of the fields in your sales order and go party on those. So this is how it works with OData 2.0. Even though I did some typos, you can do this in less than a minute. So let's look at how this actually works with creating the CDS app. So in this case, I'm going to start Visual Studio 2017 because the SDK works with both 2015 and 16. I'm going to create a new solution. Oops. TechDays 2017 CDS demo. Okay. Create it, and then now there's some really important things that you need to set up. So first of all, I need to go to the framework type. It only works with 452, so you have to do this, otherwise nothing will work in here. And you have to do those. So once you have started this, you need, first I need to go and get a NuGet package with the SDK. So go to the NuGet package manager and get the console. And now I need to go to Notepad because actually this NuGet package does not exist on NuGet, so it's hidden. So you need to know what it's called, but this is actually the name of it. Okay, so we're getting the package, including the all the data model bits in here. So and depending on the speed of the network, we should get it in. Okay, it woke up. To all. So next thing, I'm going to change my app config. And actually, there's two ways of getting to the into the CDS system. One is to create an Azure function that you call into. Another one is just to put it into a config file. But for the sake of time, I'm going to put it into the config file here, because that takes enough time. So I'm going to put this in. And now you can see there's a bunch of value in here that says replace, and I need to go out and fetch to get it to work. So I'm going to my favorite portal in here, the Azure portal. Then I'm going to the AD in here. First I need is the directory ID in here. So. And if you're doing this for a customer, usually this is something that they don't want to give out because it's sort of the personal one, but you need this, otherwise you're toast from the start on. So I'll put this into directory ID in here. Then the next thing I need to do is to go to PowerApps, and you can see up here, there's also a GUID, that's the environment ID that you also need. And you can see up here I can set my PowerShell environment, and if I use default, you'll get nothing. So I spent a day on trying to get things out of default, but nothing happened here, so you have to have something else. But just do that and save a day, trust me. So you just create another environment and use that instead. So I'll go back in here, and I should get the environment ID. So far, so good, I hope. Then we go back into Azure AD, and now here, and now we need to go and register a new app. I already did a couple of tests in here, so we do a new one. Days 2017. And now this is really important. Again, if you don't want to spend hours, you have to select native, otherwise you get sort of a weird error message. And now I need a redirect API. This can be any URL in here, so I'll just use localhost. It just needs a valid internet address or a valid URL. It doesn't have to connect to anything. So. Is it correct, Mark? I think so.
Looks good.
Good. Okay. Fire. So now I've got my application here, and go select it. Then the next thing I need to do is to go and set permissions on it to be able to access from the outside. Actually, what I'm going to do first, I need the application ID for my config file. So I'll just click here to copy and go out back to Visual Studio to at least complete this. So this is my AD application ID value. So now the config file is completed. So to get this to work, I need to set up the permissions. So I'm going to look at the list in here. I need to write add, otherwise nothing will happen. So down here I need the Azure Service Management API. I select this. I need to delegate that and select that. So one down, one to go. And then the next one requires a little bit of tweaking, because now I need to delegate the permissions for the common data service in here. So as you can probably see, it's not in here. So I tried to say common, nothing happened. Then I tried to do CDS, And then after spending a lot of time, I was desperate, so now I wrote PowerApps. Here it is. You just need to know where to get it. Okay, so now my app is there. And of course, if you're creating an app that has to work with different customers out there, you basically need to call them to, hey, can you please give me your directory ID, and then I need to go to create a new app and set up these permissions, and then send these strange-looking values back to me. And then I promise I will get things to work for you. Trust me. But actually, we now can write some code again. So I'm going to cheat a bit more because I'm using all of Mark's time.
Don't worry, we're good on time.
He needs that. So I'm going to, just like before, create a demo with a sales order. So now I got a program.cs this time, so that's good. Okay. And what you see here is the CDSA SDK. And for some reason I still understand, they decided to create the old version of the link syntax in here. So you see that you have things like select fields in here instead of the where clause. And if you want more field, you have to sort of continue this. So in OData you sort of have the select star thing. But that doesn't exist in CDS because of performance reasons. So we don't want people to select all the fields in the database and return that. That's goodness, but it sort of gives a very clunky syntax where you maybe have to add 50 of these select field statements in here. And then in order to get the lines, I need also to do this beautiful clause in here, include related, and then sales order and product related. And now I'm back to getting the select field from my sales order line in here. So. Let me just set a breakpoint here and see what we got. So far so good, I can log in. Sign in. Accept. Oh, fantastic. So now I should be able to get my query result out here. And you can see I got 20 rows back with my sales order and can dig into the first one and ask for description and some other stuff. So these fields are filled out, but the other ones are null in here. And I should also be able to go down to the order line. Sales order, there's 2 of those. I ask to get the product name out of that in my query. So you see again, same result as with the OData, just a little more work to get things in here. Also, in the SDK you can do updates of value in here. In this case I basically look if the description ends with 2, and if that I remove it, and otherwise I put it back. This was not to blow up my database doing this too many times. So I can go to all of these in here and do this update. And then what I do, the execute statement down here, this basically do a call back to the SDK and is doing all the updates. This is all goodness, but now we are on ERP, so and business logic, you would ask, do I have enough of this item in the inventory? And then if I do that, I can actually sell it to this customer. And you basically remove the items from the inventory and then put it on the order. And that happens in one transaction. But CDS does not support transactions just within one call, just like normal OData. So you can ask if there's something on the inventory, and then you can give it away, but then somebody else might have taken it before you actually got to the end. So that's so honestly, this is sort of useless for transaction use unless you want to upgrade a description on a customer. It's not really useful for doing bookkeeping or any of the stuff you will find in NAV. So so let's move back to the slides. And take the last one. So as you saw, the issue is in here that this configuration of calling your customers to get the 3 values from AED is not really scalable. You have to specify these for all the tenants that you want to get to in your code. And then all the queries you saw, they have to be written in code, and they are static, so you have no select star. For the people who play around with it, you can actually do code generation to do this query in using the Roslyn framework in Visual Studio. But also, when you try that, you also know that whenever you create a type in .NET, it stays in memory forever until the process is killed. So if you do this on a service, you would end running out of memory because your type will just eat up everything you have. So in order to get this to work, you have to do this in Azure function, or you have to use the old trick of restarting your service when it's necessary. But that's not that fun. So, and for some reason also, why on earth didn't they use the OData way of doing it? Instead, they created their own API. There must be some reasons, but it's sort of a new way to learn where the whole rest of the world is moving to OData. This is something new that was created for some reason that I don't understand. So, but that's probably a good reason for it. And also in OData, whatever custom fields you have put on your service, that will also be reflected by the .NET classes you get in your project. That's not the case in CDS, so you have to do the things where you use reference by name to get the value. This works, but it's not optimal when you are used to working with OData. And of course, that's the transaction thing that's sort of also barriers. But by reading stuff and simple things, this is doing the trick, and I hope they will create a version 2 because the ideas are great. It's not just done for major business yet, so at least we're waiting until version 2 comes out. So,
yep.
But that'll be next year, I know.
That'll be next year.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Thanks, Mark.
Sure. So this session is about connectivity. Everything is connected. You can connect to anything as long as it has an endpoint. Sharing solutions has never been easier than it is today. People are creating extensions. And I know that when Microsoft came out with extensions version 1, I was a little bit loud about not being too happy about all the pitfalls, but I think with extensions version 2, they actually got it right. And you can also see on AppSource, solutions are popping up everywhere. So repeating the same modification over and over again, and then collect the money from the customer, that's history. People can actually click, try and buy apps, and there's a star rating system, and everything starts to be connected. Why did we invent ERP? What was the reason to create ERP solutions? Right, in the 1970s and 1980s, connecting data was hard, and ERP was invented because people were tired of the sales department creating a customer, and then it would go to the AP or AR department, and they would create the same customer. And that's the reason why we created ERP solutions, so everything is in one database. But if connectivity is so easy, why do you still need to put everything in one database? It's much easier to put everything into distributed systems, because we are all aware of upgrade issues, and I'm pretty sure that extensions will solve part of the upgrade problem. But I know that some of the NAV customers out there, they use NAV and they have one database for entire Europe, right? And then they want to upgrade. And how do you upgrade entire Europe over one weekend. And it's just much easier to have a distributed system and then connect all these pieces together. And then if the sales department wants to go to a new version of their app, they can go to a new version of their app without interfering everybody else, right? So we're going from that perspective to a new era of connectivity. So yesterday, if you went to the session about APIs, Microsoft has connected NAV to Microsoft Graph. If you run NAV in the cloud, like Dynamics 365, you can actually go to Microsoft Graph and read all of your NAV data. But you can also do the same. If you install NAV 2018 at the customer, then you can actually read the data from the API that Microsoft provides, which is pretty cool. So let's actually see if we can actually make that work. And I think you already did the C# demo, right? During the CDS demo, you showed how to connect.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So now I'll go back to the rubber hammer, right?
Yeah. Fantastic tool.
So Microsoft gave us a new rubber hammer in Visual Studio Code. They moved our precious, beloved AL programming language to VS Code. So what I'm going to show you now is, let's say that you have a couple of customers using NAV, or one customer using NAV in different countries. And let's say that you want to connect those countries together, right? So rather than having one big SQL database and then everybody's connecting to the same database, we have one NAV database in Holland, one in Belgium, one in Germany, and Germany wants to read some data from the database in Holland, right? We can use the rubber hammer for that. Let's first go into the API endpoint. This is the API endpoint on NAV 2018. This is running on, I think, CTP 16 or CTP 17. You have to enable the endpoint, like Anders described yesterday. By default, the API is not enabled because Microsoft doesn't want, by accident, to expose all of this data. And you can see that we have all of these wonderful entities that you can query. And one of the entities is accounts. So let's see what accounts look like. This is my accounts API. And here I have a couple of accounts. We have FUDA, savings account. These are all of my chart of account records. So let's see if we can actually read that into NAV. And I'm going to do that using the new data types that Microsoft has provided in Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to use a framework that Arend Jan has provided. And Gunnar and I made a few small improvements to it. But you can actually download this framework from Arend Jan's GitHub. And then if I go into Visual Studio Code, I have the code unit that will actually run from, in this case, I have decided to just run it from the customer card. So I have a customer card extension where I actually go into calling the web service. Then I call the web service, and basically what Arend Jan did is he created an arguments table, and that arguments table is basically a wrapper to consume the web service in VS Code. The first thing we have to do is we have to initialize the arguments table. And in this case, I'm doing that by giving it the base URL, which is the URL of my local system. Then I'm adding the accounts endpoint, and I'm including which company I want to read from. Then I'm telling the system I want to use the get method, and I'm going to use a username and a secret password. Then I'm going to call the web service, which is also part of the argument table. I won't go into that. You can actually download that from the GitHub, and then we can go into the save result. And this is where my arguments table gets back with my web result, and this is where Gunnar did his magic. We're actually reading the result into a JSON object, and every OData endpoint that you work with always has a values class, and the values class contains the data that you can actually read from the OData endpoint. You can see that in the NAV web service. Here I have the value, right? It always starts with value. That's probably something that they discussed, and they said, let's use that word. I also, in my Swagger API, I also have the values, right? So that's probably something that these guys actually always agreed on to be a good idea. And then we have just a simple loop. We are looping over the result using the for each in AL. Actually, the funny thing is that I actually showed this to Michael yesterday in the speaker room, and he says, but when are you going to show me AL? Yeah, well, this is not C#, this is AL, right? It doesn't look so clunky anymore as it did in C-side.
But it's still clunky.
Hey. Be careful, this is a room full of NAV developers.
Yeah.
So let's execute this. Goes into the web client, tries to fire it up. And then I run the web service, and now I get the result, right? This also works in the good old Windows client. In the good old Windows client, and I can also go to a customer card, and I can run the web service, and I get the same result. Michael just showed that in C# you can connect to the endpoint, and then C# will generate all the classes for you that have all the types, and you can do the strong typing in C# against all these classes. Let's start a community project. I'm going to start a GitHub, and I think what we should do is, this is our OData API endpoint, and this contains all the metadata. And let's create something that generates a whole bunch of tables that we can use as temporary tables. And then we'll move the data from JSON with regref and fieldref into those temporary tables, right? I wanted to do this as a demo today, but I actually spent 3 or 4 Sundays and a whole bunch of evenings getting the freaking PowerApps stuff to work. So I actually did not succeed in doing that, right? So I hope you like that. Allows you to read data from NAV database to another NAV database, just like Michael did with C#. Everything is about connectivity. There's a whole bunch of tools out there. The trick is to use the correct tool for the job. Try to get out of your comfort zone and try to learn new things. Learning curve is always high, but once the penny drops, it's so much fun to start working with. If you don't get all of this, don't worry. There's probably going to be 100,000 Navision customers on Seaside forever, and you can always work for those customers, right?
Nice.
Questions?
Thank you. I know you do a lot of work with connecting NAV to other apps for your customers. How has this changed how you are going to do that? Can you give us some real-world examples?
So how is this changing how I decide to solve problems if a customer approaches me with connecting stuff? Right now, I would say I would still put NAV in the middle because CDS is not there yet. But this is something that I will definitely keep an eye on. Not everything in the real world is yet ready for OData. You would be surprised how many companies have a software package, and then you ask them, how do I connect to it? And they still are so proud of their SOAP endpoint. It's like, come on, guys, this SOAP is like 1995. Wake up and go to OData. So I think this is future, but the real world has to catch up with that. That's my opinion. I don't know if you...
Yeah, so as you all know, AL has its limitations, so you don't have dictionaries and that stuff. You don't have objects. There's a lot of things you cannot do. It's really powerful from not getting hurt. You have the rubber hammer, but that also has its limitations. So if you use OData together with C#, you now have the full .NET power underneath you, where you can do fantastic things and do it in 2 lines and really clean code. So in some cases, it's good to break out of the box and into to Visual Studio and do these things because it's so much easier than it is in AL. But AL is great at what it does today to write business logic, and .NET is good for something else. But now you have the possibility to do both very easy. And you can see that if you fasten the keyboard, you can actually get something up and running within a minute. So it's not like in the old days where you had to do SOAP stuff that took a day. And you have to have a PhD in rocket science, so this is for everybody.
Oh yeah, I've been working with SOAP endpoints which were in Dutch, and then all the keywords were in Dutch, and then you try to code in English, and then you have some programmers from Ukraine trying to help you, and you actually have to translate all the keywords. And the advantage of OData, of course, is that it's structured. It's an API that everybody agreed on with get, put, and stuff like that. Other questions? Oh, yep, almost there.
For you, Mark, when you were talking about the PowerApp, you said that you could not have the timestamp field. That means that the normal OData is not working with the PowerApp, or what? From the NAV?
OData is working with a field that they call eTag. And did you go to the API session yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the OData has an eTag, and eTag is basically the same as the timestamp. If you write back after you read it, the eTag should be the same, and if the eTag is the same, it's basically you get the same error message, or you should get the same error message as in NAV. Another user has modified the record after you read it from the database, right?
So you have to implement every table as a view if you want to
Sorry?
work? So if you want it to work from the PowerApp, you have to implement every table as a view?
If you want to work with PowerApps and you want to expose NAV data to PowerApps, you can use the API that Microsoft ships with NAV 2018. But if you have your own vertical solution, you have to create your own API as well. You can probably create an API with regref and fieldref. I think that is what Jet Reports is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Then you just get everything.
Okay.
So, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to throw it at you.
Thanks a lot. So you know how fast Microsoft is going to implement the proxy generation for OData 4 in Visual Studio 2017 or in Visual Code? It's not yet there.
So can you repeat?
So the proxy generation in C#, for example,
Yeah.
from OData imports.
Yeah.
From importing the web service is not yet working. It's not yet there. And
Does-
also, I want to, have any ideas when is it up to come?
Yeah. So
And the second question is will it exist for Visual Code also?
I don't think it exists for VS Code.
Yeah, there are tools online, if you like, Google on OData conversion to C# classes or to TypeScript classes. You can actually paste in your OData JSON file, and it will generate the C# classes for you, and you can paste it into your code. But it is actually weird that Michael actually did it in 2015 and it worked in 2017. It's gone.
Yeah.
That's the
So
point.
the reason why I did it in 2015 is that you can go and add a service reference. That has been removed from 2017, and also OData 4 does not work that way. But there's a client generating API that you or component that you it's a NuGet package that you install. That can create the things for 2015. but I haven't gotten it to work with 17 yet. So there's something missing with the item type that you want to add. So, but the documentation said it should work, but nothing shows up when I try it. So it might just be me. But there's a component you need to install, and then you have to mess with the TT file and these kind of things that's in VS. So it's more manual than what I just showed you. Yeah, but there's documentation on MSDN that shows you step by step what to do. So it's not that bad. Just more work.
I actually have a project going on which is connecting OData 4 to ASP.NET website. And we read the OData manually, and then we use the JSON convert to map it into a C# class.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it works. I showed it to Michael, and he said, we're not going to show that to this audience. Okay.
Sorry, Mark.
Okay, I can live with that.
I think we have more question up here.
We had bowling on Tuesday, and my knee still hurts. Over there?
You mentioned before that you are able to extend the common data model by ourselves. Is it quite complex? Can we do it in Visual Studio, or how would be the way to extend the model by now?
So right now you have to go to PowerApps. So there's a whole tooling experience, which is fantastic, but it's not Visual Studio. So you do it through that.
Okay.
That's also where you create your own entities.
But it's still maintained by Microsoft and also extended by Microsoft with newer updates. So
Yeah, so
we might have to take care that we get a prefix or something that it's not
it should be upgraded. But I've seen during this prototype phase that you get clunky error messages that your framework is out of sync.
Okay.
But also what proves that actually this is not really up for sale, if I actually tried to buy a PowerApp subscription, but that link does not work, and it hasn't worked for a month, so so I guess nobody bought it yet.
We have one more shirt, and then we have a whole box of... Don't forget
Other
your
shirts,
shirt. I don't want to take them back home.
Yeah, I have a general question on PowerApps because I find it very, very interesting. But it sounds to me that it's only for viewing data and not to do more complex reading between NAV.
Yeah.
Is that right? Is it something that is going to come in the future, or?
So the whole architecture behind PowerApps right now is that it works on its own database. So they didn't want to have sort of a link to other database. You can do that, Mark showed that, but sort of the core data sits in CDS underneath the system to also make it faster. And that works beautiful. And if you look at the apps in there, it can do great things. So you can do a data entry application in an hour. Looks fantastic.
It's a moving target. You know, what doesn't work today may work in a month.
The problem, however, if you want to synchronize data from NAV into this model, that's where you get all this clunkiness where the pieces simply does not fit together. But that's I assume Microsoft will fix that moving on, because otherwise it's nothing to do with NAV. It's a great replacement for Access and these kind of tools back in the early days, but it's not sort of
Access programmers and SharePoint guys love this stuff.
Yeah.
It gives them things that they never had before because they don't know Navision, right?
And also there's no code in PowerApps, so it's for end users. So code you need to create into Azure function, that's a completely different story. So
no, you can do basic logic like in Excel, adding stuff and if
correct,
then else, but that's kind of it.
yeah.
All right, thank you.
You said that you cannot use PowerApps for users outside Active Directory. So is it the way that I'm not able to provide PowerApps to the users outside Active Directory, or is there any other way?
Xamarin. You can build a Xamarin app and it uses the same technology. You can connect the Xamarin app to CDS as well, or to OData.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not PowerApp anymore. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, over there. Oh my God, how are we going to do that?
You're getting great at this, Mark.
Why am I doing this?
You're so good at it.
Just to ask, so we cannot post or make change in the database from PowerApp. We can just see the data.
As far as I know, it should be possible to also call the post. I just finished this demo last Sunday, and I was so insanely happy that I got it to work that I didn't want to touch it anymore.
Okay.
But it should be possible to do it.
Okay.
So soon the PowerApps API, you can of course write back what you put into the system. And also using CDS, you can, like I showed you, change data and write it back or create new entities. But you cannot do transaction like you have in Code Unit 80 and NAV today, where you do a bunch of things together and you roll back everything. That's not part of the solution yet, so it's sort of a fire and forget thing where you do one thing at a time and then it's over. But there's no rollback. Everything is committed at once, or not.
Any other questions? Okay, well,
Coffee time.
coffee time. Thank you.
Thank you.